Welcome, gentle listener, to a quieter time, a slower world. Tonight we drift back through the mists of 40,000 years, back to when humanity was young and the earth itself felt different, beneath bare feet. Allow yourself to settle into this moment. Perhaps you're lying in a warm bed, surrounded by the soft comfort of modern life. Electric lights chase away the darkness at the touch of a switch. Clean water flows from a simple turn of the wrist. Food waits patiently in your kitchen, preserved and ready. As we begin this journey together, I'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight and what time is it for you? It's a strangely comforting thought, knowing we're all quietly connecting across time zones, across continents. And if this kind of storytelling brings you a sense of peace, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it truly helps you rest. But tonight we journey to a time when none of these gentle luxuries existed. A time when survival was measured not in years or months, but in the careful rhythm of each passing day. When the difference between life and death could be as simple as whether the morning fire still held its precious embers. Imagine yourself drifting back through centuries of human progress, through the rise and fall of empires, through the first written words, the first planted seeds, the first clay vessels. Back further still, to when our ancestors moved like shadows across an untamed world, carrying their entire lives on their backs, following the ancient paths of mammoth and bison across landscapes we can barely imagine. This is their story, the story of daily life in the Paleolithic world, where each sunrise brought the same quiet question: will we survive another day? Let the modern world fade around you. Now feel yourself settling into the rhythm of their days, the endless patient rhythm of survival itself. You wake slowly, pulled from uneasy sleep by the cold creeping through animal hides. The surrounding cave breathes with the soft sounds of your sleeping band. Quiet snores, the rustle of fur against stone, the whispered moan of someone lost in dreams. But something is wrong, something your sleeping mind recognized before your waking thoughts could catch up. The fire has died, or yesterday evening brought the gentle crackle of burning wood and the warm dance of orange light against cave walls. Now there is only the gray whisper of cold ash. You can smell it. That particular scent of burnt wood turned to dust, mixed with the dampness that seeps constantly through limestone walls. Your breath forms small clouds in the morning air. When you realize with a sinking in your stomach that the careful work of keeping fire alive through the night has failed, imagine yourself there, wrapped in the stiff hide of some long-dead animal, feeling the cold stone beneath your hip, your shoulder. There is no soft mattress here, no pillow that remembers the shape of your head. Your bed is whatever fur you could gather, laid over a rock that has never known warmth. The stone holds the memory of winter deep in its heart, and that cold seeps through hide and fur until it settles in your bones. Your muscles ache from the unforgiving surface, but more than that, they ache from yesterday's endless walking, yesterday's constant search for food, yesterday's careful work of staying alive. Around you, others begin to stir. There are perhaps 15 in your bandsmen. Women, children, all bound together by the simple need to survive. Some are family, connected by blood. You cannot name but bonds you feel in the way they share their warmth on cold nights, the way they place themselves between danger and the children. Others are simply those who have chosen to walk the same paths, share the same dangers, hope for the same small mercies that each day might bring. An old woman whose face carries the map of countless seasons. A young man whose shoulder bears the scars of a cave, bears claws. Children who have never known any world but this endless cycle of movement and searching. But now the fire is dead and the day's first task looms before you like a mountain to be climbed. Fire is life. Fire is warmth when the wind cuts through your animal skins like ice water. When the morning frost turns your breath to clouds and makes your fingers too numb to work. Fire is the light that keeps the night creatures at bay. Cave bears whose massive forms can fill a cave entrance. The wolves whose eyes gleam like fallen stars in the darkness beyond your small circle of safety. The great cats whose silent paws make no sound until their claws find flesh. Fire is the tool that transforms raw meat into something your stomach can hold without rebellion. That softens tough roots into something your teeth can manage without breaking. That drives the parasites from fresh kills and makes bitter plants palatable. Without fire, you are simply another animal waiting to die in the cold. You rise stiffly joints, protesting the movement with sharp reminders of yesterday's labors, and begin the morning ritual that has shaped every dawn of your life. The ritual that separates the living from the dead, the human from the beast. Someone must gather, tender the precious dry grass that crumbles between your fingers like golden dust, the bits of birch bark that peel from trees in papery sheets, the tiny scraps of wood fiber that catch flame like captured sunlight. This tinder must be kept dry through rain and snow, protected in pouches made from the stomachs of animals treasured like the gift of life itself. Someone must find proper kindling wood pieces, thin enough to catch fire quickly but thick enough to hold it, long enough to ignite larger fuel. These must be gathered carefully, selected, with the knowledge that comes from watching fires die when the wrong wood was chosen, from nights spent shivering because the kindling was too green, too wet, too thick to catch the precious spark, and someone must venture out into the dangerous world beyond the cave mouth to gather the larger wood that will keep the flames alive through another day. This task cannot be done alone. Predators watch for the solitary human, sensing vulnerability like wolves sense wounded prey. But it cannot wait either, because fire, once lost, is not easily found again. The morning air tastes of rain that might come, of snow that threatens to fall from clouds the color of old bone. Your bare feet find the familiar stones near the cave entrance. Each step, careful, deliberate. The floor of your cave is uneven, limestone, worn smooth in some places by countless generations of feet, sharp and treacherous in others, where water has carved unexpected hollows. You know every stone, every depression, every place where ice forms, first when winter comes and last when spring finally arrives. Outside, the world stretches in every direction. Endless grassland broken by patches of forest, cut by streams that run cold and fast toward horizons you have never seen and never will. The grass grows tall here, taller than a person in some places, providing cover for both prey and predator. In the distance, dark shapes move across the plain, mammoths perhaps, or the great bison whose migrations define the rhythm of your year. The sky promises whether that could change. In moments, from gentle coolness to driving sleep, from warm sunshine to the kind of wind-driven rain that chills you to the bone, your stomach gnaws at itself with familiar hunger. That constant companion that never fully leaves only grows stronger or weaker, depending on the fortune of recent days. The last successful hunt was 3 days ago. Small deer taken after hours of patient stalking. Its life ended with a single spear thrust that took all the skill your band could muster. Its meat was divided among 15 mouths with careful precision, each person receiving barely enough to quiet the constant ache. The children getting slightly larger portions because their small bodies cannot survive on as little as the adults. Since then, you've lived on what can be foraged from a world that gives reluctantly and takes eagerly. Bitter berries that stain your fingers, purple and pucker your mouth. Their sharp taste a small price for the sugars your body craves. Tough roots that must be pounded with stones until they become something approaching edible, their fibers breaking down under patient work until they yield their meager nutrition. Grubs, found beneath fallen logs, their pale bodies, providing precious fat that your constantly working muscles demand. Nuts, when you can find them, their shells cracked between rocks, their meat extracted with thorns and patience. The work of gathering food is endless, patient and dangerous, not just because some berries kill with beautiful toxins that stop the heart. Some mushrooms bring fever and hallucinations and death. Some roots burn the mouth like fire and leave their victims unable to eat for days. But because every moment spent bent over bushes, every moment digging in, the earth with bare hands or simple digging sticks, is a moment when you cannot watch for the predators that consider human flesh just another item on their daily menu. The rhythm of your days follows patterns older than memory, patterns carved into your very bones by generations of ancestors who survived long enough to pass on their knowledge. Wake with the gray light of dawn, when the eastern sky begins to lighten, but the sun has not yet shown its face. Tend a fire or rebuild it from yesterday's coals. If fortune has smiled and left some embers still glowing beneath the ash, ate whatever food remains from yesterday's searching, dividing it carefully according to need and hierarchy, making sure that no one takes more than their share, while ensuring that the sick and injured receive enough to maintain their strength. Gather your few possessions, the flint tools shaped with countless careful strikes, each one a small masterpiece of survival technology. The bone needles that hold your clothing together, carved from the leg bones of animals and polished smooth with use. The hide bags that carry everything you own in this world, sewn with scents and waterproofed with animal fat. The spears whose wooden shafts have been hardened in fire, whose flint points have been knapped with patience that modern minds cannot comprehend. Then movement, always movement. Your world is defined by motion, by the constant need to follow resources that themselves never stay in one place. Your band follows the herds, and the herds follow the seasons. The seasons follow rhythms you feel in your bones but cannot name or predict with certainty. When the great bison move north towards summer grazing grounds, you move north, following their trails across grasslands that stretch beyond the horizon. When the mammoths turn east toward winter shelter in the protected valleys, you turn east, trusting their ancient wisdom about where warmth and food might be found. Your world is one of constant walking, constant carrying, constant searching for the signs that mean food, water, safety for another day. There are no roads in your world, no permanent paths, except those worn by the hooves of migrating herds. Each day's journey is planned carefully, with scouts ranging ahead to look for water sources, to check for signs of predators, to search for the landmarks that mean you are still following the right trail towards survival. The weight of your possessions grows heavier with each mile, though you carry so little by modern standards. Every item must justify its place in your pack by its usefulness for survival. There is no room for decoration, no space for items that serve only beauty or comfort. Your tools are functional, worn smooth by use, paired and re-repaired until they finally break beyond mending and must be replaced. Each step is chosen carefully, deliberately. The ground beneath your feet tells stories for those who know how to read them. The press, grass that means animals. Have passed this way recently. The scattered droppings that reveal what they ate and when. The broken branches that suggest whether they moved in haste or grazed peacefully. You read the earth like others might read words on a page, searching for the narrative that will keep your people alive for another day, another week, another season. Your clothing is the skin of dead animals, and you are constantly aware of this fact in a way that modern people never are about their garments. Each piece of hide was once a living creature that breathed and felt pain and fear. It was scraped clean of flesh with stone tools, process that required hours of patient work and left your hands raw and aching. It was softened with patient rubbing, worked with stones and sticks until the stiff dead skin became pliable enough to wrap around a human body. Furthermore, it was sewn together with scents pulled from the muscles of other dead animals, threaded through holes punched with bones. Your clothing carries the permanent scent of smoke and blood and the particular mustiness of hide that has never been fully clean. In winter, you wrap yourself in layers, fur against your skin for warmth, hide over that for wind protection, more fur tied around your shoulders and legs for additional insulation. The fur retains the shape and scent of its original owner, and sometimes, in the darkness of cold nights, you can almost feel the ghost of the animal that died to keep you warm. In summer, you might wear only a simple skin wrapped around your waist, but even then you carry more clothing with you, because weather changes without warning in. Your world in cold kills quickly. A sudden storm can drop the temperature by 20 degrees in minutes. A change in wind direction can bring killing frost. Even in what seemed like mild weather, your survival depends on being prepared for conditions that can shift like the moods of angry gods. Your hands are never clean, and the concept of cleanliness is modern people understand it does not exist in your world. Your hands are stained with berry juice that marks the seasons. Red from summer raspberries, it's purple from autumn elderberries, dark from the walnut holes that provide precious protein. They are marked with cuts from flint knapping, the inevitable price of making the stone tools. Your survival depends on every attempt to shape. Flint leaves small wounds where sharp edges find flesh, and these cuts heal slowly, leaving permanent scars that map your skill with stone. Your hands are roughened by rope made from twisted plant fibers, rated by the constant work of carrying and lifting and manipulating the materials of survival. Your fingernails are broken and black with earth, and beneath them lies the permanent grime of a life spent working with stone and wood and dead animals. There is no soap in your world, no clean water used only for washing. Every drop of water is precious, used first for drinking, then perhaps for softening tough meat or soaking plant fibers, then finally for cleaning if any remains, which it rarely does. Your feet have never known the cushioning of shoes, and they are shaped by a lifetime of contact with the unforgiving earth. The soles are thick, with calluses built up over years of walking on stone and thorn and ice, layers of hardened skin that provide some protection but still allow you to feel every pebble, every root, every crack in the frozen ground. In winter, you might wrap them in fur secured with strips of hide, but even then you feel the cold seeping through, numbing your toes, until you must stop frequently to restore circulation by rubbing and movement. By evening, your feet ache with a deep bone, tired soreness that penetrates beyond muscle into the very marrow of your bones. This pain is your constant companion, as familiar as hunger, as persistent as the need to stay alert for danger. Only sleep can ease it. But sleep brings its own risks in a world where predators hunt by night and weather changes without warning. But perhaps most exhausting of all is the constant alertness, the way your mind can never rest, never drift into the comfortable inattention that characterizes modern life. Every shadow might hide a predator crouched and waiting. Every sound in the grass might mean danger approaching or opportunity passing. By every change in the wind might bring the scent of rain that will make fire impossible, of smoke that means other humans nearby, who might be friendly or hostile, lure of the great carnivores that hunt by scent and can follow a trail for miles. Your senses have been honed by necessity and shaped by countless generations of natural selection until they operate at a level that modern humans have almost entirely lost. You can hear the difference between the footfall of deer and elk, distinguish between the various calls of birds that signal different types of danger, smell the difference between the smoke of your own fires and the fires of strangers. You can see the subtle signs that mean water lies ahead, the particular green of vegetation that grows near streams, the flight patterns of birds that need daily water, the insects that hover over hidden springs. Furthermore, you can read weather in ways that meteorologists with all their instruments might envy. The color of sunset clouds tells you about tomorrow's wind. The behavior of animals reveals approaching storms hours before they arrive. The feel of air, pressure against your skin warns of changes that could mean the difference between life and death for your exposed band. The children in your band learn survival from their first breath, absorbing knowledge that takes modern children years to acquire through formal education. By the age when contemporary children might be learning to read letters on a page, these young ones know which plants heal wounds and which cause them, which animals can be approached safely and which must be avoided, how to start fire with flint and steel when tinder is precious and mistakes mean death. They know how to read weather and the color of sunset clouds, how to find water by following the flight of birds, how to tell from tracks how long ago an animal passed and in which direction it was traveling. They carry their own simple tools, smaller versions of adult implements, and contribute meaningfully to the daily work of staying alive. Furthermore, they understand in ways that no child should have to understand, that their survival depends absolutely on the survival of the group, that individual wants must always yield to collective needs. There is no privacy in this life, no solitude except the loneliness of death. You sleep, pressed against others for warmth, sharing body heat, because fuel is too precious to waste on fires large enough to warm sleeping bodies. You eat from shared kills, taking your portion according to rules established by generations of survival, rules that ensure the group's continuation, even if it means individual want. Furthermore, you relieve yourself within sight of your companions, because venturing alone into the wilderness, even for such basic needs, means becoming prey for the patient predators that watch for exactly such moments of vulnerability. Your most private thoughts remain locked within your own mind, expressed only through gestures and grunts and the shared understanding that comes from facing the same dangers day after day. There are no books in your world, no writing, no way to preserve thoughts except in the fragile memory of living minds. When someone dies, their knowledge dies with them, unless they have successfully passed it on to others through demonstration and repetition. Language, as you might understand it, does not exist in your world. There are sounds that mean danger is approaching, sounds that mean food has been found, sounds that mean come quickly or stay back or help me carry this burden. but the complex ideas, the abstract thoughts, the stories that bind cultures together and give meaning to existence. Beyond mere survival, these exist only as shared experiences, as the collective memory held in the gestures and expressions and unspoken understanding of your small band. Communication happens through touch, through shared glances, through the subtle positioning of bodies that indicates hierarchy and relationship and emotional state. A hand placed on a shoulder might mean comfort, warning, or claim of possession, depending on the context. The direction of a gaze might indicate where a game has been spotted or where a danger lurks. The way someone holds their spear might signal readiness for hunt or defense. When someone is injured, there are no doctors, no hospitals, no medicines, beyond what grows wild in the forest and what wisdom has been passed down through generations of trial and error. A broken bone might heal crooked, if it heals at all, leaving someone limping for life or unable to keep up with the band's necessary movements. An infection might spread unchecked until fever claims another member of your dwindling group. A difficult birth might claim both mother and child, reducing your numbers by 2 in a single day and leaving motherless children whose survival becomes the responsibility of the group. You have seen this happen. You have held the hands of friends as fever burned away their lives. Furthermore, you have helped dig the shallow graves and ground too hard for proper burial, have scattered earth and stones over people who shared your fires and your dangers. You have moved on afterward, because staying means death for those who remain, because grief is a luxury that survival cannot afford, because the living must always take precedence over the dead. In a world where every day brings new threats to continued existence, death is your constant companion, in ways that modern people can barely comprehend. It walks beside you in the form of the predators whose tracks cross your path. It rides the wind that brings storms and cold. Furthermore, it hides in the plants that nourish and the plants that poison, and the water that sustains and the water that carries disease. You have seen children taken by fever, adults taken by injury, elders taken by the simple accumulation of hardships that their bodies could no longer endure. And yet, in this harsh world, there are moments of quiet beauty that shine like stars against the darkness of constant struggle. Of the way morning mist rises from a stream where deer come to drink, their graceful necks bent to the water as the sun paints everything golden. The taste of wild honey, rare and precious as jewels discovered in a hollow tree and shared in tiny portions that make everyone close their eyes in momentary bliss. The warmth of shared fire on a cold night, when everyone gathers close and the dancing flames hold back the darkness and create small circle of safety in a dangerous world. The satisfaction of a successful hunt, when fresh meat means strength for another week, and the knowledge that the children will sleep with full bellies. The simple comfort of sleeping safely, surrounded by others who have chosen to share your fate. They're breathing a gentle rhythm that speaks of life continuing for at least one more night. The sight of northern lights dancing across winter skies, unexplained but beautiful, reminding you that the world holds wonders beyond mere survival. But these moments are brief, scattered like bright pebbles along a difficult path. Most of your life is the patient repetition of survival tasks, performed with the thoroughness that means the difference between life and death. Gather wood before the fire dies completely, tend the flames before they consume all the fuel. Search for food before hunger becomes weakness. Prepare for weather before the storm arrives. Watch for danger before the attack comes. Walk to the next day's hunting ground before the current area is exhausted of resources. The same tasks, repeated endlessly, because stopping means dying, and dying means failing not just yourself but everyone who depends on you. There is no retirement in your world, no time when you can rest and let others carry the burden. You work until injury or illness or age makes work impossible, and then you become a burden that the group carries because they hope others will carry them when their time comes. Your days are measured not by clocks, but by the sun's movement across the sky, by the changing angle of light that tells you how much time remains for gathering, for hunting, for travel, before darkness makes all such activities dangerous. Your weeks are measured by the success or failure of hunts, by the finding or losing of good water sources, by the presence or absence of signs that indicate whether you are following the right path toward survival. Your months are measured by the migration patterns of the animals you depend on, by the ripening of different plants, by the changing weather that signals the approach of different survival challenges. Your years are measured by the cycle of seasons, by the return of familiar landmarks, by the accumulation of scars and knowledge that mark the passage of time through your body and mind. As night falls, you settle once again onto your bed of hides and stone, arranging the furs to provide maximum warmth while allowing you to move quickly if danger threatens during the dark hours. The fire crackles with fresh wood gathered at the cost of time and energy, and risk sending shadows dancing across cave walls like the ghosts of all the days that have led to this moment. The flames will need tending through the night, a responsibility shared among the adults in careful rotation, because fire lost in darkness might not be recovered before dawn. Tomorrow will bring the same challenges, the same patient work of staying alive, the same careful attention to weather and water and the signs that spell danger or opportunity, the same division of labor between gathering and hunting and tool-making in the thousand small tasks that keep a group of humans alive in a world that offers no guarantees. Your world will continue its slow turning through seasons. You measure not in calendars, but in the migration of herds, the changing of leaves, the first ice on still water, the return of birds that signal spring's approach. The rhythm of your days will continue, endless and patient, shaped by needs that never change and challenges that never ease. This is the rhythm of their days, the endless quiet rhythm of survival itself, night after night, season after season, year after year, until the earth reclaims what it is given. And new generations take up the same patient work of living in a world that offers no promises except the promise of another dawn, another chance to gather enough food and fuel and safety to see one more sunset, one more rising of the stars that wheel overhead in patterns your ancestors learned to read for navigation and season telling. The rhythm continues, patient and persistent as the wearing of water on stone, as the growth of mountains, as the slow dance of ice ages that shaped continents. It is the rhythm of human endurance, of the refusal to surrender in the face of overwhelming odds, of the quiet heroism that lies in simply continuing to breathe, to move, to hope for another day in a world that gives no assurance that such hope is justified. And in that rhythm lies something essential about what it means to be human. Not the grand gestures or the great achievements that history remembers, but the simple, stubborn determination to survive, to continue to find meaning, and even beauty in the midst of hardship. That would break the spirit of anyone who had not been shaped by generations, of those who faced the same challenges and found the strength to endure. The evening fire settles into gentle embers. Let us drift from the daily struggles of survival to follow the quiet story of one particular life, a story written in ochre and bone, discovered in a Welsh cave more than 30,000 years after its ending. Imagine yourself settling deeper into contemplation as we trace the path of someone who once walked these same ancient rhythms we have just explored. The archaeologists called him the Red Lady of Paving, though he was neither red by nature nor a lady by birth. The crimson that stained his bones came from ochrea, iron oxide mixed with clay and scattered over his body in death like powdered sunset. For nearly 2 centuries, scholars debated the identity of these remains, these fragments of humanity wrapped in mystery and colored by time. But slowly, patiently, the bones began to tell their story. Picture him in life, this young man of perhaps 25 winters walking the coastal plains of what would one day be called Wales. But in his time, 34,000 years ago, there was no Wales, no Britain, no separation between island and continent. Where now the Irish Sea rolls gray and cold, then stretched endless grassland dotted with lakes and crossed by rivers that have long since drowned. Beneath rising waters, the world he knew was locked in the grip of ice, but not the barren wasteland you might imagine. The edges of the great glaciers teemed with life, mammoth and woolly, rhinoceros, cave lion and giant bear, reindeer in herds that darkened the horizon like moving clouds, and among them moved his people, small bands of hunter-gatherers, following the ancient paths of survival. We have already walked together in imagination. Let us call him Kali, though he bore no name that would translate to modern tongues. His names, as we understand them, barely existed in his world, perhaps a sound, a gesture, a particular way of being recognized by his band. But for our quiet journey through his life, let him be Kaylee, which means warrior in a language that would not be spoken for thousands of years after his death. Kaylee was born in late winter, when the band had taken shelter in a cave system near what is now the Gower Peninsula. His first breath tasted of smoke and cold, of the particular dampness that clings to limestone, of the musk of animal hides and the metallic temps of melting ice. His mother labored through the dark hours before dawn, her cries mingling with the wind that howled across the coastal plains and the distant rumble of ice breaking, apart as winter slowly yielded to spring. The birth was difficult, as births often were in that harsh world. For hours the outcome remained uncertain, teetering between life and death in the way that all existence balanced. In those days, the women of the band gathered around their weathered hands, gentle with knowledge passed down through generations of mothers, their voices soft with encouragement and prayer to spirits whose names have been forgotten for longer than recorded history has existed. When Kaylee finally emerged into the world, small and blue and barely breathing, they rubbed his tiny body with fat and wrapped him in the softest furs they possessed. The old woman who served as the band's healer, scarred by a cave bear's claws but possessed of knowledge that meant the difference between life and death, breathed her own warmth into his lungs until his chest began to rise and fall with the rhythm that would carry him through his brief journey across the earth. His childhood was spent learning the lessons that would keep him alive, absorbing knowledge through observation and imitation rather than formal instruction. By the time he could walk steadily, he knew which berries were safe to eat and which would bring sickness. By the time he could run, he could read the signs that meant wolves were hunting nearby or that weather was about to change. By the time his voice began to crack with approaching manhood, he could nap flint with steady hands and knew the difference between tracks left by prey and tracks left by predators. But Kali was different from the others in his band in ways that became apparent as he grew, where other children seemed content to learn the basic skills of survival. He showed an unusual fascination with the world beyond immediate necessity. He would spend hours studying the patterns of stars, the flight of birds, the way water moved over stones. He collected unusual pebbles, interesting bones, fragments of crystal that caught the light in pleasing ways. More significantly, he showed an early inclination toward what we might call spiritual matters, though that word carries meanings that would have been foreign to his world. While others focused on the practical concerns of finding food and staying warm, Kali seemed drawn to questions that had no immediate survival value. He would sit for long periods watching the play of light and shadow, listening to sounds that others ignored, touching objects with a reverence that suggested he perceived something in them that escaped ordinary observation. This tendency might have made him a burden to his band, an impractical dreamer in a world where every member needed to contribute to survival. But Kaylee's unusual perspective proved to have its own value. His attention to details others missed made him an exceptional tracker. His sensitivity to subtle changes in environment made him unusually good at predicting weather. Ability to see patterns where others saw only randomness made him valuable in the complex work of navigation that kept the band moving in the right direction across vast, featureless landscapes. As he approached manhood, it became clear that Cabin's role in the band would be somewhat different from the others. He was not the strongest hunter, though he was competent with spear and knife, was not the most skilled toolmaker, though his work was adequate for daily needs. Instead, he became something like what later cultures might have called a shaman or medicine man, though even these terms carry implications that would have been foreign to his world. What Kaylee possessed was a particular sensitivity to the unseen aspects of existence. The patterns that connected weather to animal behavior, the relationships between different plants that meant one could be used to counteract the poison of another, the subtle signs that indicated the presence of fresh water or the approach of danger. He became the one his band turned to when ordinary knowledge proved insufficient, when the familiar methods of survival seemed inadequate to the challenges they faced. The training for this role was informal, learned through apprenticeship to the old healer woman who had saved his life at birth. She taught him which plants could ease pain, which could stop bleeding, which could bring on fever that might burn illness from the body before it could take Hold. She showed him how to read the messages written in the shape of clouds, behavior of insects, the particular quality of light that preceded different types of weather. But perhaps most importantly, she taught him about the ochre, red ochre iron oxide that colored the earth in shades from pale pink to deep burgundy. Held special significance for his people. It was gathered with ceremony ground, with care, mixed with fat, and applied to the living and the dead with reverence that spoke of meanings deeper than decoration. The old woman showed Kaylee where the best ochre could be found, how to prepare it properly, how to apply it in patterns that had been passed down through generations. The ochre served many purposes in their world. Mixed with fat, it protected skin from sun and wind and insects. Applied to tools and weapons, it may have served to prevent rust or improve grip. Used in ceremonies, it transformed ordinary humans into something more. Beings connected to the red earth that gave life, the red blood that sustained life, the red sunset that ended each day and promised the return of morning. But for Kaylee and those who shared his particular calling, ochre represented something even more profound. It was the substance that connected the world of the living with whatever realm awaited beyond death. When someone died, their body was painted with ochre before burial, transforming them from mere flesh into something sacred, something that belonged as much to the earth as to the realm of human memory. Kaylee's life reached its peak during his 20th winter, when he underwent the ceremony that marked his full acceptance into the role he had been preparing for since childhood. The details of this ceremony have died with his people, but the evidence suggests it involved isolation, fasting, and the application of ochre in patterns that marked his transformation from ordinary band member to spiritual guide. For several years after this initiation, Kaylee served his people with distinction. He guided them to new hunting grounds when the old ones became barren, treated injuries and illnesses with growing skill. He performed the ceremonies that marked important transitions: birth, coming of age, death, using rituals whose meaning we can only guess at, but whose importance is evident in the care with which they were preserved and passed down. But Kaylee's world was changing in ways that would ultimately prove fatal to his way of life. The great ice sheets that had locked the northern regions in cold for thousands of years were beginning their slow retreat. This change brought new opportunities. Land that had been frozen became available for hunting. New migration routes opened up for the herds his people followed, but it also brought new challenges and new dangers. The melting ice changed weather patterns in ways that were difficult to predict. Storms became more violent and less predictable. The timing of seasons shifted, making it harder to know when to expect the return of migratory animals or the ripening of familiar plants. Rivers changed course. Lakes appeared where none had existed before, and coastlines shifted as the sea began its slow rise toward modern levels. More dangerously, the changing conditions brought his band into contact with other groups of humans, some friendly but others hostile. Competition for the best hunting grounds intensified as the landscape itself shifted. Old agreements about territory became meaningless when the territory itself no longer existed in familiar forms. It was during one of these encounters with strangers that Kaylee's story began, moving toward its quiet end. His band had been following a herd of reindeer along what they thought was a familiar route, but the melting ice had created new lakes where dry land used to be, forcing them to detour through territory they did not know well. Here, they encountered another band, one that claimed the hunting rights to the area and demanded that Kaylee's people leave immediately. The negotiations that followed were tense and difficult. Neither group spoke exactly the same language, though they shared enough gestures and sounds to communicate basic ideas. Both groups needed access to the reindeer herd, but the hunting ground was not large enough to support two bands without the risk of driving the animals away entirely. Some form of compromise needed to be reached, but the cultural mechanisms for reaching such compromises were fragile and easily disrupted. Kaylee played a crucial role in these negotiations, using his spiritual authority to propose solutions that both groups might accept. For several days, it seemed that peaceful coexistence might be possible. Temporary boundaries were established, hunting schedules were coordinated, and both bands began the careful work of sharing resources without depleting them. But the agreement broke down when members of the other band accused Kaylee's people of violating the territorial boundaries. Whether this accusation was accurate or whether it arose from misunderstanding or deliberate provocation remains unclear. What is certain is that tensions escalated rapidly, and what had been careful negotiation transformed into the kind of conflict that could only end in violence or separation. Kaylee's band chose separation, withdrawing from the disputed territory rather than fight for it. This decision may have been influenced by Kaylee's advice, as his role as spiritual guide included helping his people make decisions about when to fight and when to flee. The wisdom of avoiding conflict when possible was deeply ingrained in hunter-gatherer culture, with the loss of even one or two band members could doom the entire group. But the withdrawal came at a cost. Forced to leave the rich hunting grounds they had been following, Kahn's band found themselves in marginal territory. Game was scarce, and the plants they relied on for supplemental food were less abundant. The stress of poor nutrition, combined with the extra energy required for constant movement in search of resources, began to take its toll on the group. It was during this period of hardship that Cabin fell ill. The sickness began subtly, a persistent cough, a gradual loss of appetite, a fatigue that seemed to deepen rather than ease with rest. At first, he attributed these symptoms to the general stress their band was experiencing, but as weeks passed, it became clear that something more serious was affecting him. The illness may have been tuberculosis or pneumonia, or one of the many infections that could prove fatal in a world without modern medicine. The old healer woman tried all the remedies she knew: teas made from bark and leaves, puces applied to his chest, ceremonies designed to drive away the evil influences that might be causing his decline. But nothing seemed to help, and gradually Cabin began to weaken in ways that everyone recognized as the approach of death. The final weeks of Kaylee's life were spent in a cave system near the coast, where his band had taken shelter while he grew too weak to travel. The caves provided protection from weather and predators, but more importantly, they offered the privacy and quiet that approaching death seemed to require. Here, surrounded by the people who had shared his life's journey, Cabin began the slow process of letting go of his connection to the world. During these final days, he spent much of his time in a kind of meditation, his eyes often closed, his breathing shallow but peaceful. Sometimes he would speak, though his words seemed directed toward things that others could not see. The old healer woman recognized these signs. She had witnessed many deaths over her long life, and she knew the particular quality of awareness that marked the transition between life and whatever lay beyond. On his last morning, Kali asked to be moved outside the cave where he could see the sky and feel the wind on his face. The request required considerable effort from his weakened bandmates, but they understood the importance of honoring it. They carried him carefully to a spot where the morning sun could warm his body and where he could watch the clouds moving across the vast expanse of sky. He died as the sun reached its highest point, his breathing simply becoming slower and slower until it stopped entirely. There was no struggle, no dramatic final moment, just a gradual fading like a fire burning down to embers and then to ash. Those who watched said his face became peaceful in those final moments, as if he had seen something that satisfied him completely. The burial that followed reflected both Cabin's special status within the band and the deep reverence his people felt for the mystery of death. His body was prepared with careful ceremony, washed with precious water and anointed with fat mixed with fragrant herbs. But, most significantly, he was painted with ochrea, the sacred red earth that had marked his spiritual calling in life and would mark his transition to whatever realm awaited beyond death. The ochrea was applied, not randomly but in patterns that held meaning for his people, patterns that connected him to the earth, to the band, to the spiritual forces he had served during his life. Red ochrea was rubbed into his hair, painted on his face, applied to his hands and feet. His clothing and possessions were also treated with ochrea, transforming them from ordinary objects into sacred items that would accompany him on his journey beyond the visible world. The burial itself took place in a shallow grave within the cave system where he had died, a location chosen because it could be easily defended from scavengers and because it held spiritual significance as a threshold between the world of the living and the world of the dead, his body was placed in a fetal position, perhaps symbolizing his return to the womb of the earth, and surrounded by the possessions he would need in whatever existence awaited him. These grave goods tell us much about how his people viewed both Callie's role in their community and their beliefs. About life after death, they included his personal tools, the flint knives he had used for practical work, the bone needles he had used for sewing, the various implements of his trade as a healer and spiritual guide. They also included items that seemed intended purely for the afterlife: shells gathered from distant beaches, ivory carved into shapes whose meaning we can only guess at, and more ochre than any living person could have used. But perhaps most telling were the personal ornaments found with his remains. Periwinkle shells had been carefully perforated and strung together, creating what may have been necklaces or bracelets. Ivory rods had been carved and polished to a smooth finish. A mammoth skull fragment had been shaped into a pendant or ceremonial object. These items spoke of a person who held special status within his community, someone whose death was mourned and whose memory was honored with grave goods that represented significant investment of time and resources. The care taken in Kelly's burial also suggests that his people believed his influence would continue after death. The ochre that stained his bones was not simply decoration, but a form of spiritual preparation, a way of ensuring that he would be recognized in the afterlife as someone who had served the spirits during his earthly existence. The positioning of his body, the selection of great goods, the location of the burial itself. All of these decisions reflected beliefs about the continuation of existence beyond physical death. For 34,000 years, Kali's remains lay undisturbed in their cave burial, slowly being covered by the gradual accumulation of sediment and debris that marks the passage of geological time. The people who buried him eventually moved on, following the herds and the seasons according to patterns that had governed human existence for millennia. The ice sheets continued their retreat. The sea levels continued to rise and the landscape itself transformed until the world Kali had known disappeared entirely beneath water in time. When his bones were finally discovered in 1823, they created a mystery that would puzzle researchers for nearly 2 centuries. The red staining was immediately apparent, but its significance was not understood. The grave goods were clearly ancient, but their age was difficult to determine with the archaeological methods available at the time. Most puzzling of all, the care taken in the burial suggested a level of cultural sophistication that did not fit with prevailing ideas about prehistoric human development. It was only with the development of modern dating techniques that Kali's true age could be established, and only with advances in archaeological interpretation that the significance of his burial could be understood. The ochre that had seemed mysterious to early researchers was recognized as evidence of sophisticated spiritual beliefs. The grave goods were understood as indicators of social complexity and individual status. The care taken in burial was seen as proof that even our earliest ancestors possessed the capacity for reverence, memory, and hope for continuation beyond death. Today, Golan's story serves as a bridge between the world we know and the world our ancestors inhabited 34,000 years ago. His bones tell us about the harsh realities of Paleolithic existence, the constant threat of disease, the brevity of life, the ever-present struggle for survival. But they also reveal something more profound, evidence of the spiritual awareness that seems to be uniquely human. The capacity to find meaning in existence beyond mere survival. The ability to create beauty and ceremony and hope in the face of harsh realities. In the quiet darkness of the cave where he was buried, Kali's story becomes part of the larger human story. The long, slow journey from simple survival to war, the complex civilizations that would eventually produce art and music, and literature and science. Our stained bones remind us that this journey began not with grand achievements, but with simple human responses to the mystery of existence, the desire to honor the dead, the hope for continuation beyond death, the need to find meaning in the brief span of individual life. And so we leave him there in the peaceful darkness of his cave burial, surrounded by the possessions he carried through life and the okria that marked his passage into whatever realm awaited beyond death. His story fades back into the silence of deep time, but the questions he represents remain with us. What does it mean to be human? How do we find meaning in mortality? What do we owe to those who have gone before us, and what legacy do we leave for those who will come after? The rhythm of his days has ended, but the rhythm of human seeking continues, patient and persistent, carrying us forward on the same journey of discovery that began when our earliest ancestors first looked up at the stars and wondered what lay beyond the visible horizon of their small, dangerous, beautiful world. As we drift deeper into the quiet mysteries of our ancient past, let your mind wander now from individual stories to something larger, something that connects all those scattered bands of early humans across vast distances and impossible spans of time. Imagine yourself moving through darkness, carrying only the wavering light of a torch made from animal fat and twisted grass, following narrow passages that wind deep into the heart of the earth itself. You are entering the sacred spaces our ancestors created in the deepest, most dangerous parts of caves, galleries decorated with images that have survived for over 30,000 years, outlasting empires, languages, entire civilizations. These paintings represent perhaps humanity's first attempt to capture something eternal, something that transcends the brief span of individual existence. They are messages sent across time, though we can only guess at what they were meant to say. The caves where these ancient artists worked were not comfortable places. To reach the painted galleries required crawling through passages, barely wide enough for a human body, squeezing past limestone formations that could trap the unwary, navigating by the uncertain light of primitive torches that could fail at any moment and leave explorers lost in absolute darkness. The air in these deep chambers was thin and stale, filled with the exhalations of countless previous visitors, both human and animal. Picture yourself making this journey following the same paths that artists walked 30 millennia, how your torch casts dancing shadows on the rough stone walls, and your breathing echoes strangely in the confined spaces. The temperature is constant here, neither warm nor cold, but somehow removed from the familiar rhythms of surface weather. Water drips somewhere in the darkness. Ahead, each drop marking time with the patient persistence of geological change. The passages twist and turn, sometimes opening into chambers large enough to stand upright, sometimes narrowing until you must crawl on hands and knees through spaces that press against your shoulders and back. Your torch flame flickers in the uncertain air currents, and you begin to understand why the ancient artists chose these places for their work. The deep caves represent a boundary between the familiar world of daily survival and something else, a realm where normal rules don't apply, where the spirits might dwell, where transformation becomes possible. When you finally emerge into the first painted chamber, the impact is immediate and profound. The walls come alive in the dancing torchlight, covered with images that seem to move and breathe in the wavering. Illumination bison surge across stone, surfaces as if caught in mid-stampede. Horses rear and gallop along cave walls that curve and flow like frozen landscapes. Mammoths march in stately procession toward destinations, known only to the artists who painted them. But these are not simple pictures drawn for decoration or amusement. The images are placed with careful intention, following the natural contours of the stone, using bulges and depressions to create three-dimensional effects that make animals appear to leap from the walls themselves. The artists understood something about the interaction between light and shadow, between flat surface and sculptural form, that would not be rediscovered by human culture for thousands of years. The pigments themselves tell stories of dedication and spiritual commitment that speak across the millennia. The red ochre that dominates many paintings came from deposits that might be found miles from the caves, requiring dangerous journeys across territory controlled by predators and hostile bands. The black charcoal was created by burning specific types of wood under controlled conditions, then grinding the results to achieve exactly the right consistency and color. Yellow ochre, rarer and more precious than red, was gathered from special clay deposits and prepared with ceremonies we can only imagine. Manganese oxide, which provided the deepest blacks, was even more difficult to obtain and prepare. Each color represented not just artistic choice, but significant investment of time, energy and risk by communities that could barely spare resources for anything beyond immediate survival needs. The preparation of paint was itself a complex process requiring knowledge passed down through generations of artists. The pigments had to be ground to precisely the right finest course, and they would not adhere properly to stone too fine, and they would not provide adequate dot coverage. They were mixed with binders made from animal fat, plant saps, other organic materials that would help them penetrate the stone surface and remain stable over time. The tools used for painting were as varied and sophisticated as the pigments themselves. Brushes were made from animal hair, tied to bone or wooden handles. Hollow bird bones served as blowpipes for creating spray effects. Fingers, palms, and even entire hands were used as painting instruments, leaving behind handprints that serve as signatures from artists whose names we will never know. Some of the most haunting images in these ancient galleries are the hand stencils, negative prints created by placing a hand against the cave wall and blowing pigment around it, leaving the outline when the hand was removed. These stencils appear in caves across Europe, from Spain to France to Eastern Europe, suggesting a shared symbolic vocabulary that connected widely scattered groups of early humans. The hands themselves tell stories about the people who made them. Some show missing fingers, possibly from frostbite or accident, possibly from ritual amputation practiced by some ancient cultures. Others show hands that were clearly those of children, suggesting that the cave painting tradition was passed down from adults to young apprentices, that these sacred spaces welcome the participation of the entire community. But perhaps most mysteriously, some of the handprints show proportions that don't quite match modern human anatomy. Hands that seem somehow different, more robust, with finger ratios that suggest these artists belong to populations whose physical characteristics had been shaped by tens of thousands of years of adaptation to Ice Age conditions. The animals depicted in these cave galleries represent a bestiary of creatures that dominated the Please world. Cave lions, whose massive forms rivaled modern tigers, stalk across stone walls with patient intensity. Woolly rhinoceros armed with horns longer than a human arm stand in profile with heads lowered, as if ready to charge. A megalosaurus giant deer with antlers spanning, from tip-to-tip pose, an elegant silhouette like dancers frozen in mid-performance. But the most common subjects are the animals that provided sustenance for the cave painters' communities. Bison appear again and again, sometimes singly, sometimes in vast herds that flow across chamber walls like frozen rivers. Horses run in formation, their manning, their hooves barely touching the stone surface. Reindeer graze in peaceful groups, their antlers forming complex geometric patterns against the cave. The accuracy of these animal portraits is stunning, demonstrating observation skills honed by generations of hunting and tracking. Every muscle is correctly placed, every proportion accurate, every behavioral detail true to life. These were not artists working from imagination, but from intimate knowledge gained through daily contact with the animals they depicted. They knew how bison moved when grazing versus when fleeing, how horses held their heads when alert versus when relaxed, how mammoths used their trunks for different purposes. Some of the most intriguing cave paintings seem to show animals in motion, as if the artist were trying to capture movement itself rather than static form. Bison with multiple sets of legs suggest running motion. Horses appear with heads in different positions, as if showing the sequence of movement through time. Some researchers have suggested these represent the world's first attempts at animation. Protoscene created by flickering torchlight that would make the images appear to move. But the painted animals were not merely artistic subjects. They held deep spiritual significance for the people who created them. The selection of which animals to paint, where to place them within the cave system, how to arrange them in relation to each other, followed rules we can sense but not fully understand. Certain animals appear in specific locations within caves, as if their placement was determined by ceremonial requirements rather than artistic preference. The deepest chambers often contain the most powerful images. Cave lions and bears that seem to emerge from the darkness itself, their eyes reflecting torchlight with almost supernatural intensity. These locations would have been accessible only to the most dedicated individuals. People willing to crawl through dangerous passages and risk becoming lost in the underground maze. The paintings in these chambers may have been part of initiation ceremonies, spiritual journeys that transformed ordinary individuals into shamans or spiritual leaders. Some cave chambers contain arrangements of paintings that seem to tell stories, though the narratives remain locked in symbolic languages. We may never fully decode. A sequence of bison might represent the seasonal migration patterns that determine the survival of human communities. A group of horses might encode information about weather patterns or territorial boundaries. A gathering of different animal species might represent the complex relationships between predator and prey, hunter and hunted that governed life in the Paleolithic world. The geometric symbols that accompany the animal paintings add another layer of mystery to these ancient galleries. Dots arranged in careful patterns, lines that form complex grids, abstract shapes that might represent maps, calendars, or spiritual concepts beyond our current understanding. These symbols appear in caves separated by hundreds of miles and thousands of years, suggesting that early human cultures shared symbolic vocabularies more sophisticated than we might expect from people we often dismiss as primitive. Some researchers have proposed that the dots and lines represent early forms of astronomical observation, records of lunar cycles or seasonal changes that were crucial for survival in a world where timing meant the difference between feast and famine. Others suggest they might be territorial markers, maps of hunting grounds or migration routes encoded in symbolic form. Still others believe they represent the first attempts to record and transmit complex cultural information across generations. The acoustic properties of painted cave chambers add yet another dimension to the mystery. Many of the most heavily decorated chambers have unusual sound characteristics. Natural amphitheaters where voices carry in remarkable ways. Spaces where whispers can be heard clearly across great distances. Locations where normal speech takes on otherworldly resonances. This suggests that the caves may have served not only as galleries for visual art, but as venues for ceremonies that combined image, sound, and movement in ways we can barely imagine. Archaeological evidence from painted caves supports the idea that they were sites of complex ceremonial activity. The floors of decorated chambers often contain evidence of fires built in specific locations, sometimes in patterns that mirror the arrangements of paintings on the walls. Above fragments of musical instruments, bone flutes, cushion instruments made from hollowed bones suggest that the caves echoed with music as well as chanting and storytelling. The footprints preserved in the soft clay floors of some caves provide haunting evidence of the human presence in these sacred spaces. Adult footprints move in deliberate patterns, following pathways that suggest ceremonial processions or ritual dances. Children's footprints appear alongside those of adults. It's indicating that the cave ceremonies included the entire community and served educational as well as spiritual purposes. But, perhaps most mysteriously, some caves contain footprints that seem to show people moving in unusual ways, crawling when they could have walked upright, following security's routes when direct paths were available, stopping in specific locations for extended periods. These movement patterns suggest that the caves were navigated according to ritual requirements rather than practical considerations. That the journey through the painted galleries was as important as the destination. The preservation of these ancient artworks through 30 millennia represents one of the most remarkable achievements of human cultural transmission. The specific conditions within deep caves, constant temperature, high humidity, protection from weather, and vandalism created natural museums where humanity's earliest artistic expressions could survive virtually unchanged. But this preservation was not accidental. The ancient artists chose their locations with care, selecting cave chambers that would provide the best conditions for long-term survival of their work. The pigments themselves were prepared with techniques that maximize their stability and permanence. The mineral-based paints penetrated deep into the stone surface, becoming essentially part of the cave wall rather than merely applied to its surface. The organic binders used to mix the paints were selected for their ability to remain stable over long periods, resisting the chemical changes that would cause other organic materials to decay. The artistic techniques employed by cave painters demonstrate sophisticated understanding of how to create images that would remain visible and meaningful across vast spans of time. The use of natural stone contours to create three-dimensional effects ensured that the paintings would continue to appear lifelike even as lighting conditions changed. The careful placement of images in relation to cave geography created viewing experiences that would remain powerful regardless of technological changes in lighting or access methods. Modern discoveries continue to expand our understanding of Paleolithic cave art. New sites are found regularly, each adding pieces to the puzzle of how our ancestors understood and interacted with their world. Advanced dating techniques reveal that cave painting traditions persisted for thousands of years, passing from generation to generation with remarkable consistency in style and symbolism. Digital technology now allows researchers to document and analyze cave paintings with unprecedented precision. Three-dimensional scanning captures every detail of cave contours and painting placement, revealing subtleties that were invisible to earlier investigators. Chemical analysis of pigments provides new insights into ancient trade networks and resource management. Computer modeling helps reconstruct the viewing experiences of ancient cave visitors, showing how flickering torchlight would have made static images appear to move and breathe. But despite all these technological advances, the fundamental mystery of cave art remains unsolved. Can describe what we see, analyze the materials and techniques used to create it, and place it within the context of Paleolithic culture. But we cannot fully understand what it meant to the people who created it, what messages they intended to convey, what spiritual or practical purposes it served in their daily lives. Perhaps this is as it should be. The cave paintings represent humanity's first attempt to create something that would outlast individual mortality, to send messages across the vast gulf of time that separates us from our earliest ancestors. They speak to us not in words we can understand, but in images that resonate with something deeper than language, something that connects us to the shared human experience of wonder, creativity, and the desire to leave meaning behind. As you follow the ancient pathways through these painted caves, surrounded by images that have watched silently through 30,000 years of human history, you become part of a continuous chain of observers that stretches back to the artists themselves. The bison that stampede across these walls have been seen by countless generations of humans, each bringing their own interpretations. It's their own sense of wonder, their own questions about what it means to be conscious in a universe that seems unconscious of us. The handprints on these walls were made by people who lived lives of unimaginable hardship by modern standards, yet who found time and energy to create beauty, to express something beyond mere survival. They crawled through dangerous passages, risked becoming lost in underground darkness. It's invested precious resources in pigments and tools, all to leave behind images whose meaning we can feel but not fully comprehend. In the flickering light of your modern torch, or perhaps the more authentic illumination of animal fat burning in a stone lamp, you see what they saw. Animals, moving across stone surfaces, its hands reaching across time. Symbols whose meanings echo in some deep chamber of human consciousness where memory and dream intersect. The silence in these deep chambers is profound, broken only by the sound of your own breathing, the occasional drip of water from limestone formations, the whisper of air moving through passages carved by geological time. It is a silence that connects you to every other human who has stood in this space, marveling at images created by people whose names are lost, but whose artistic vision remains as vivid as the day it was painted. And in that silence you begin to understand something about the human spirit that transcends the brutal realities of Paleolithic existence. Despite lives shortened by disease and injury, despite constant threats from predators and weather and starvation, despite the endless demands of mere survival, our ancestors found within themselves the capacity for art, for beauty, for the creation of meaning that extends beyond individual mortality. The cave paintings are their gift to us, messages sent across 30,000 years of human history. They remind us that consciousness itself may be humanity's greatest achievement. Not the consciousness that solves problems or builds technologies or conquers environments, but the consciousness that creates beauty, that finds meaning in existence, that reaches across time to connect one human spirit with another through the simple act of making marks on stone that say, wordlessly but unmistakably, we were here, we were human, we mattered. As you make your way back through the narrow passages toward the surface world, following the same paths the ancient artists took when their work was complete, you carry with you images that will remain in memory long after the details of daily life have faded. The painted animals continue their eternal migrations across cave walls, watched over by handprints that serve as signatures from humanity's childhood. When we first learned that consciousness could create something more lasting than the brief flame of individual existence. As we emerge from the painted darkness of the sacred caves, let your mind drift now toward the flickering light of evening fires, where a different kind of magic was being born. Around these fires, in the gentle hours between the day's hunting and the night's rest, something uniquely human was taking shape. The first stirrings of what we might recognize as leadership, spirituality, and the ancient art of storytelling that connects us all, settle deeper into contemplation as we explore how some members of these early bands began to hold positions that, and beyond the basic survival roles we have already encountered. These were not kings or priests, as later civilizations would understand such positions, but individuals whose unique gifts or circumstances allowed them to influence their communities in ways that transcended the daily struggle for food and shelter. Picture yourself in a cave mouth as evening falls, the day's hunting complete and the night's danger still hours away. This is the quiet time when the immediate pressures of survival temporarily ease and space opens for other kinds of human activity. The fire crackles at the center of your small community, casting dancing shadows on familiar faces and creating a circle of warmth and light against the vast darkness of the prehistoric world. Around this fire sit perhaps 15 or 20 individuals, the total population of your band, men and women, children and elders, all bound together by the shared work of staying alive in a world that offers no guarantees. But even within this small group, subtle hierarchies have emerged, differences in status and influence that reflect both practical necessities and deeper human tendencies toward organization and meaning-making. Near the fire's warmest spot sits a figure whose presence commands a particular kind of attention. Let us call him Thane, though. Like all names in this ancient world, his identity is expressed more through gesture and recognition than through words. As we understand them, Thane is neither the strongest hunter in the band nor the most skilled toolmaker. Yet when he speaks, others listen with an attention that suggests his words carry weight beyond their immediate content. Thane's authority stems from his role as keeper of the fire, position that might seem simple to modern understanding, but carried profound significance in a world where fire meant the difference between life and death. The responsibility was not merely practical, ensuring that flames never died completely, that fuel was gathered and prepared, that embers were carefully banked for the night hours. Firekeeping required understanding that went beyond the mechanical, touching on the spiritual relationship between humans and the element that separated them from all other animals. The firekeeper needed to understand the different qualities of various woods, how oak burned slowly and steadily, while birch caught quickly but consumed itself rapidly, how pine provided bright flames but dangerous sparks. Certain fungi could be dried and stored to serve as tinder when other materials were unavailable. But beyond this practical knowledge, the firekeeper served as guardian of something sacred, the flame that connected the band to their ancestors. It carried fire across countless generations and to their descendants, who would depend on this same sacred flame for their survival. Thane's education in firekeeping had begun in childhood, watching and learning from the previous keeper, gradually absorbing not just techniques but the deeper understanding that came with it. Responsibility for the community's most essential resource, learned to read the signs that indicated when weather changes would make fire building difficult, how to prepare special tinder that could catch even when conditions were poor, how to bank coals so they would survive through storms or the wettest nights. But perhaps most importantly, he learned the ceremonies that surrounded firekeeping, rituals that transformed practical necessity into something approaching religious observance. The evening banking of coals was performed with specific gestures and sounds that had been passed down through generations. The morning rekindling involved prayers or invocations to spirits that governed fire and weather. Special occasions required particular types of wood, specific arrangements of fuel, ceremonies that connected the band's fire to larger spiritual realities. As they grew into his role, he began to develop additional skills that complemented his firekeeping responsibilities. His constant attention to weather signs made him valuable as a predictor of storms and seasonal changes. His knowledge of different woods and their properties extended into understanding of plants more generally, making him useful as a healer when band members suffered injuries or illness. His role as keeper of sacred flame gradually evolved into something like what later cultures would recognize as shamanic or priestly functions. The transformation was gradual and informal, emerging from practical necessities rather than formal designation. When someone fell ill, they naturally turned to Thing because his plant knowledge made him the person most likely to know which herbs might help. When weather signs were ambiguous, his opinion carried extra weight because his fire-keeping responsibilities had made him more attentive to atmospheric changes than others in the band. When disputes arose within the group, disagreements about where to hunt next, conflicts over the distribution of food, tensions between individuals that threatened group harmony, Tyne's voice became important, not because he held formal authority, but because his spiritual role gave him a kind of neutrality that others respected. He served the entire band through his firekeeping, owing special allegiance to no individual, making his counsel seem more trustworthy than advice from those who might have personal interests at stake. Gradually, almost without anyone noticing the transition, Fane became the person others consulted when facing decisions that went beyond immediate practicalities. His opinion was sought on questions about timing, when to move camp, when to begin seasonal migrations, when conditions were right for attempting dangerous but potentially profitable hunts. His judgment was valued in matters of resource allocation, how much food to consume immediately versus how much to save for leaner times, whether to use precious materials for immediate needs or save them for emergencies. Most significantly, Fane became the keeper of the band's collective memory, the repository of stories and knowledge that connected present survival to experience. In a world without writing, where knowledge could be preserved only in human memory, this role carried responsibilities that were both practical and spiritual. Thine remembered which areas had provided good hunting in previous years, which plants had proven useful for healing, which weather patterns had preceded disasters or periods of abundance. But his memory held more than practical information. Fane became the keeper of stories about the band's ancestors, tales that connected current members to the long chain of survival that had led to their existence. He remembered stories about great hunts and terrible winters, about band members who had shown particular courage or wisdom, about encounters with other groups that had ended in friendship or conflict. These stories served multiple purposes. Within the small community, they provided entertainment during the long evening hours when practical work was finished. But sleep had not yet arrived. They offered instruction, teaching young band members about dangers they had not yet encountered and strategies they had not yet needed to employ. Most importantly, they created continuity between past and present, giving the band a sense of identity that transcended the immediate circle of current members. The telling of these stories became a kind of ceremony in itself, with Fane developing techniques that would be recognized by storytellers throughout human history. He used rhythm and repetition to make stories memorable, employed gestures and facial expressions to bring characters to life, varied his voice to distinguish between different speakers in the narrative. The fire provided natural stage, lighting, casting shadows that enhanced dramatic moments and creating an atmosphere conducive to the suspension of disbelief that effective storytelling requires. Around the fire, listening to things, stories, band members experienced something that went beyond mere entertainment or instruction. They participated in the creation of meaning, the transformation of random survival experiences into coherent narrative that suggested their lives were part of something larger than individual existence. The stories created connections between the living and the dead, between experience and future possibility, between the small band and the larger human community scattered across the dangerous world. Bethy was not the only member of the band whose role transcended basic survival functions. In a shadowed corner of the cave mouth sat another figure whose influence operated through different but equally Important channels, let us call her Vera, an elderly woman whose hunting days were long past, but whose knowledge and judgment had earned her a position of quiet authority within the group. Vera's influence stemmed partly from her age, rare enough in a world where life expectancy was measured in decades rather than the centuries modern humans might hope for. But longevity alone did not account for her status. Other band members had lived long lives without achieving Vera's particular kind of influence. Her authority came from the depth and breadth of knowledge she had accumulated over years of careful observation and from her skill in applying that knowledge to benefit the entire group. Vera served as the band's master healer, keeper of knowledge about plants and treatments that could ease pain, fight infection, and sometimes mean the difference between life and death. Education had begun in childhood, learning from the previous healer but had continued throughout her life as she encountered new plants, experimented with different preparations, and gradually built up a pharmacopoeia that represented generations of accumulated wisdom. Her healing knowledge went far beyond simple plant lore. Vera understood the relationships between different ailments, recognizing patterns that allowed her to predict how illnesses might develop and what treatments were most likely to prove effective. She knew which injuries were likely to heal cleanly and which might develop complications, which fevers should be allowed to run their course and which required intervention, which pains indicated serious problems, and which were merely temporary discomfort. But perhaps most importantly, Vera understood the psychological aspects of healing, the ways in which hope and despair could influence recovery, the importance of maintaining patient morale during treatment, the delicate balance between honest assessment and supportive optimism that effective healers must maintain. Her treatments often included not just physical remedies but emotional support, as practical advice and spiritual comfort that addressed the whole person rather than merely the immediate symptoms. Vera's healing work had gradually expanded to include other roles that drew on similar skills. Her ability to observe and interpret physical signs made her valuable as a reader of weather patterns and seasonal changes. Her knowledge of plant cycles and animal behavior made her useful in decisions about when and where to search for food resources. Furthermore, her understanding of human nature, developed through years of treating both physical and emotional ailments, made her a valuable counselor when band members faced difficult personal decisions or relationship conflicts. Like Tyne, Vera had become a keeper of memory, though her stories focus more on practical knowledge than on entertainment or group identity. She remembered which plants had proven effective for specific ailments, treatment combinations had worked or failed in the past, which individuals had shown particular susceptibility to certain types of illness or injury. Her memory served as the band's medical library, preserving crucial knowledge that could mean the difference between life and death when health crisis arose. The relationship between Tyne and Vera illustrated the complex social dynamics that were beginning to emerge within even small hunter-gatherer groups. Both held positions of authority and respect, but their influence operated through different channels and served different functions within the community. Tyne's authority was more public and ceremonial, expressed through his fire-keeping duties and storytelling activities. Vera's influence was more private and practical, exercised through her healing work and personal counseling. Sometimes their roles complemented each other perfectly, as when illness struck the band and both spiritual support and practical treatment were needed for recovery. Tyne might perform ceremonies designed to appease spirits thought to cause disease, while Vera administered plant medicines and provided nursing care. Together they addressed both the spiritual and physical aspects of healing, offering comprehensive treatment that reflected their cultures, understanding of the connections between mind, body, and spirit. But occasionally their different approaches created tension within the group. One's spiritual explanations for events sometimes conflicted with Vera's more empirical observations. His inclination towards ceremony and tradition might clash with her willingness to experiment with new treatments or abandon approaches that had proven ineffective. These conflicts, handled carefully, could lead to productive discussion and synthesis. Handled poorly, they could create divisions that threatened group harmony. The emergence of specialized roles like firekeeping and healing represented the beginning of social complexity that would eventually characterize all human societies. Even within bands of 15 or 20 individuals, Division of labor was becoming more sophisticated than simple distinctions between hunting and gathering, tool-making and childcare. Individuals were beginning to develop expertise in specific areas, to hold positions that carried particular responsibilities and privileges, to exercise influence based on knowledge and skill, rather than merely physical strength or family relationships. These developments were not without costs, as some band members began to specialize in roles that did not directly produce food or tools. The burden of basic survival tasks fell more heavily on others. Hunters might resent having to share their kills with individuals whose contributions to group survival were less tangible. Toolmakers might question why they should provide implements to people whose own work seemed less essential to immediate needs, but the benefits of specialization generally outweighed the costs. Bands with skilled healers suffered fewer deaths from injury and disease. Groups with effective firekeepers were less likely to lose the precious flame that meant warmth, light, and protection. Communities with knowledgeable spiritual leaders had better frameworks for making complex decisions and maintaining group cohesion during difficult periods. The authority exercised by figures like Thane and Vera was fundamentally different from the power that would characterize later forms of leadership. It was based on knowledge and service rather than force or inheritance. It required constant demonstration of competence and continued consent from the community. Furthermore, it carried responsibilities as well as privileges, obligations to serve the group's welfare rather than personal ambition. This early form of leadership was also notably inclusive in ways that later societies would often abandon. Both men and women could hold positions of authority and respect within the band, though their roles might be different. Age was honored for the wisdom it brought, rather than dismissed for the physical limitations it imposed. Even children could begin to develop specialized knowledge and skills that would eventually earn them positions of responsibility within the community. The evening hours around the fire provided the primary venue for these early leaders to exercise their influence and share their knowledge. As darkness gathered outside the circle of firelight, the band would gather to hear Tan's stories, to bow, consult Vera about health concerns, to participate in the informal discussions that shaped group decisions and maintained social bonds. These fireside gatherings served functions that went far beyond entertainment or practical planning. They created opportunities for the transmission of cultural knowledge from one generation to the next, for the resolution of conflicts that might otherwise threaten group harmony, for the development of shared values and beliefs that gave meaning to the harsh realities of survival. Around the fire, the band became more than a collection of individuals trying to stay alive. They became a community with shared identity, common purpose, and collective wisdom. The conversations that took place during these evening gatherings were unlike anything that would be possible in later larger societies. Every member of the band could participate directly in discussions that affected group decisions. Everyone's voice could be heard, everyone's opinion considered, everyone's needs taken into account when plans were made. This participatory democracy was made possible by the small size of the groups and the intimate knowledge that band members had of each other's strengths, weaknesses, and needs. But even within this egalitarian framework, the influence of individuals like Tyne and Vera was clearly recognizable. Their words carried extra weight in group discussions. Their opinions were sought more frequently than those of other band members. Their approval or disapproval of proposed courses of action could significantly influence group decisions. They had begun to exercise something recognizable as political power, though it operated through persuasion and respect rather than force or formal authority. The emergence of these leadership roles represented a crucial development in human social evolution. For the first time, some individuals were beginning to exercise influence that went beyond their immediate family relationships or personal physical capabilities. Authority was becoming based on knowledge, wisdom, and service to the community, rather than simply on strength, age, or kinship ties. The foundations were being laid for the complex social hierarchies that would eventually characterize all human civilizations. Yet this early form of leadership remained tied to the immediate needs and consent of the community in ways that would later be lost as societies grew larger and more complex. Thane's authority as firekeeper depended on his continued competence in maintaining the flames that kept his band alive. Vera's influence as healer required ongoing demonstration of her ability to treat illness and injury effectively. Neither could maintain their positions simply through tradition or force. Their leadership had to be earned anew each day through successful service to their community's needs. As you sit in the flickering firelight watching these early forms of human leadership take shape, you witness something profound and historically significant. The specialization of roles, the emergence of authority based on knowledge and service, the development of systems for transmitting wisdom across generations, all of these represent crucial steps in the long journey from simple survival to complex civilization. The stories that tell around the evening fire will evolve into the epic poems that preserve cultural memory in literate societies. The healing knowledge that Vera carries will develop into the medical traditions that save countless lives in future generations. The participatory decision-making processes that govern band life will provide the foundation for democratic institutions that emerge thousands of years later. But perhaps most importantly, the evening gatherings around prehistoric fires represent humanity's first experiments with creating meaning beyond mere survival. The shared stories, the collective decision-making, the ceremonies that mark important transitions. These early humans were developing the capacity for culture, for creating systems of meaning that give purpose and direction to human existence, beyond the basic biological imperatives of staying alive and reproducing. The fire burns lower as the evening progresses, its flames settling into the steady glow of well-established coals. One by one, band members drift away to their sleeping places, wrapping themselves in animal furs and settling onto beds of grass and hide. But Tain remains by the fire, carefully banking the coals that will preserve the precious flame through another night, ensuring that tomorrow's dawn will bring the renewal of warmth and light and the human community that depends on both. In his quiet vigil by the dying fire, he embodies something essential about early human leadership, the recognition that authority carries responsibility. That power exists to serve the community rather than the individual who wields it. That the flame of human civilization must be tended carefully through the dark hours if it is to survive to see another dawn. The rhythm of their days continues, but now enriched by the presence of individuals whose roles transcend basic survival, who provide the community with healing, spiritual guidance, and the stories that connect present experience to the larger human journey through time, around their fires and their quiet conversations. In their careful preservation of knowledge and tradition, they are laying the groundwork for everything that human civilization will eventually become. As our quiet journey through deep time draws to its gentle close, let yourself settle into the peaceful understanding of how far we have traveled together, not in distance but in the profound span of years that separates us from those first flickering fires. Those first painted caves, those first tentative steps towards something recognizably human. In our ancestors' daily struggle for survival, the fire beside you now, whether the soft glow of electric light or the warm flicker of candle flame, carries within it the memory of every fire that is burned since those ancient bands first learned to capture and preserve the spark that separated them from all other creatures. Each flame is connected to those first precious embers, carefully banked against the darkness, tended through countless nights by individuals whose names are lost but whose dedication lives on in the very fact of our continued existence. Think now of the comfort that surrounds you as you prepare for sleep. Softness of your bed, the warmth of your blankets, the security of walls and roof that protect you from weather and predators alike. These simple luxuries represent the accumulated achievement of 40,000 years of human effort, the patient building of civilization, one small innovation at a time, generation after generation, each adding their small contribution to the great work of making human life less precarious, more comfortable, more meaningful than the bare struggle for survival our ancestors knew. Your evening meal, consumed without thought or ceremony, represents abundance. That would have seemed miraculous to Cabin and his band, who knew intimately the knowing anxiety of empty bellies and the constant calculation of how long their meager stores might last through the harsh months ahead. The glass of clean water beside your bed, clear, safe, available at the simple turn of a handle, embodies engineering, marvels in public health, achievements that represent countless hours of human ingenuity. the slow accumulation of knowledge about sanitation and water treatment that has freed you from the daily worry of thirst and waterborne disease that shadowed every moment of their existence, the very act of lying down to sleep in safety, without the need to post guards or worry about the approach of predators in the darkness, reflects the profound transformation of the human condition over these long millennia. Where our ancestors slept fitfully, with one ear always listening for danger, you can surrender completely to rest, trusting in the great web of civilization that surrounds and protects you. The distant police officer making rounds, the firefighter on duty through the night, the complex systems of law and order that have made such peaceful sleep possible for millions of souls across the globe. Even your ability to learn about these distant ancestors, to imagine their lives and struggles with such intimate detail, represents a kind of miracle. They could never have conceived the written word, the preservation of knowledge across generations, the patient work of archaeologists and historians who have reconstructed their world from fragments and traces. All of this creates a bridge across time that allows their experiences to speak to us still, their humanity to touch ours across the vast gulf of years. The cave painters of Vasco, working by flickering torchlight to capture the essence of the animals they hunted, could never have imagined that 40,000 years later, their images would be preserved and studied, that their artistic vision would move people to wonder and admiration in an age of electric light and digital screens. Yet in creating those paintings, they were reaching across time toward us, asserting their humanity, their need to make meaning from the raw materials of existence, their desire to leave something beautiful behind in a world that often seemed harsh and unforgiving. In the gentle rhythm of your breathing as sleep approaches, you carry forward the same essential humanity that animated Kaylee's concern for his band, AK's dedication to preserving knowledge, Melania's quiet acts of charity. In a plague-stricken world, the fundamental human experiences, loss, hope, fear, the desire for meaning and connection remain constant across all these centuries, binding us to our ancestors in ways that transcend the vast changes in how we live our daily lives. The worries that kept Melania awake in her villa, listening to distant sounds in the night, and wondering what the future might hold for her children, echo in different forms in the concerns of parents today, the satisfaction AKA felt in completing a difficult passage of copying and preserving something precious for future generations' lives on, and every teacher who shares knowledge, yes, every artist who creates something beautiful, every person who contributes to the great ongoing project of human culture and understanding. As you drift now towards sleep, let yourself rest in the knowledge that you are part of this great continuum, this long chain of human becoming that stretches back to those first tentative steps out of Africa, those first deliberate burials that showed our ancestors had learned to grieve, those first cave paintings that announced to the universe that humans were not content merely to survive but needed also to create meaning, beauty, purpose from their brief time in this world. The darkness that gathers around you as consciousness fades is the same darkness that sheltered our ancestors through countless nights, but it no longer holds the terrors that once made sleep so difficult to achieve. You can surrender to it peacefully, knowing that you are held safely in the great web of human achievement, protected by the accumulated wisdom and care of 40,000 years of human striving. Sleep now, and in your dreams perhaps you will meet them. Kaylee, banking the fire against the night. Aka, bent over his manuscript in the soft light of his oil lamp. Melania, walking quietly through her darkened house, checking on her sleeping children. They are with you still. These ancestors whose struggles made your peace possible, whose hopes and dreams live on in your ability to rest safely and easily in a world they helped to create, grain by grain, day by day, choice by choice through the long, slow dawn of human becoming. Rest well, knowing that in your sleep you carry forward their deepest aspirations and that tomorrow, you too will add your small contribution to this great work that is never finished, this patient transformation of the world into something a little more comfortable, little more beautiful, a little more worthy of the remarkable creature that first learned to make fire, to create art, to dream of something better than mere survival. The rhythm of your breathing slows, deepens, becomes part of the great rhythm of human time, carrying you gently into the peaceful darkness where all our ancestors await. where the long story of human becoming continues in the quiet theater of dreams.